T here, welcome to the Halloween painting tutorial video. This is the painting we're going to work on together and I'll talk you through the steps. So we're going to start off by just using a pencil to put in the line of the horizon, and then I also used a compass to make the circular shape for the moon. If you don't have a compass handy, you can find maybe a bowl or a plate or something circular that is the correct size that you can draw around. It's important that you get a good sharp circular shape for this. Next I'm going to talk to you about the colours that you're going to use, and I'm going to speed up the video a little bit here so you can see things working a bit faster. Basically what I'm doing here is I'm creating 4 different sections of white and using my lighter blue, which is my Cerulean blue, to make a lighter blue, and the other blue that I have on my palette is Ultramarine. So I'm using different quantities to make a lighter and darker version of these blues. So you can see I've already got 4 different blues on my palette along with the original colours by doing this mixing. Keeping your brush clean, I'm going back in now, and by adding more of the pigment of the paint, I'm getting also another darker colour. I did try mixing these together, but it didn't give me much difference in change here. And then you're going to need to think about getting some fresh water. We're going to mix the creamy off-white colours now. This is a flat brush I'm using for this. You can use flat brushes or you can use a round brush. So this is an example of what a round brush is like. And brushes, just while we're on the topic, come in all different sizes, and they have a number on them. So you can find the number on your brush by having a look at the side, and this is a number 8 I'm using. So again, speeding things up a little bit here to make things work faster. I'm making a very light pale cream, and then I'm making a slightly darker cream with the other yellow that's on my palette. The 2 yellows I'm using are Naples Yellow and Yellow Ochre. Clean brush again, and I'm going to start to work from the lightest colours first. So I'm working on the moon using the much lighter creamy colours, and you'll also see me dipping straight into the white paint as well to also add some pure white in some areas. I'm adding some of the darker yellow now to try and create a bit of a shadow, and a dry brush in a stippling, which this is where we dab on the paper to try and get those to blend together without just kind of blending them together by rubbing a brush over them. Now around the moon, a really light white, and I'm going to start to introduce the really light blue colour. So we're going to go from the lightest blue to the darkest at the edges because we're trying to capture that kind of glow that the moon depicts at night. So you're going from your lightest blue, which you would have made with your Cerulean blue and white, and then you're going to the next one, the next darker, and so on until you keep going out to the outer edges. Now don't worry at this stage if your blues don't look exactly right. You're going to tweak them, you're going to go over them a few times, and you know, with paint, that's the beauty of painting. You can change things once things are dry, and you can layer things on top. So what we're doing here is using layering techniques to our advantage. So you can see I've got to the outer part now, and I'm bringing in that darker blue, and I'm trying to kind of get a blend so that we don't want a definite line where one colour stops and the other one starts. Now I'm using a grey. So I'm adding some grey to the blue to give me a darker blue again. I'm not using any black in this picture. It might look like black, but it's actually just a very dark grey. So that's given me an even darker blue to put onto those outer corners. Now I'm bringing in some of the white again trying to get that blend effect. Adding a little bit of grey in the moon to kind of get the effect of the craters that you might see on the surface of the moon, and back to a bit of stippling with a dry brush. Very important that you use a dry brush in this, and I'm also introducing some extra white paint. Now the edges. So I've lost the edges a little bit as I've been doing my painting, so I'm trying to redefine. So be careful of this with yours because I actually went over my pencil mark a bit too much. I'm trying to redefine or show sharply the edges of the moon, where they start and where the sky, or where they stop, sorry, and where the sky starts. Oops, I got a little bit of white there where I didn't want it. So now I'm using that dry brush to blend the paint that's already sitting on my paper. I might have felt that it was a little bit too dark. So I'm trying to use that in that kind of dabbing and stippling motion to create more of a softer blend than you'd get by running the brush across the surface. Again, there's a little bit of playing with this. You have to kind of push and pull, get darker, get lighter, get darker, get lighter, so you're changing things all the time as you go. And I'm feeling like that left side maybe is a little bit too dark. But look, go with it and we'll see how we get on. And sometimes it's good, even if you're not really happy with a place, to not keep overworking it, because it's better to let that area dry and then you can cover it up better. So I've tried to use that blue around the moon now to redefine the edge of the moon that I kind of lost. I'll probably bring some white back into this later on. Now it's time to start to put in the mountain. So you'll see I put a little bit of water on the paper before I started to introduce paint. This is the grey paint I mentioned before. And the water is great because it allows me to spread it around. And you can see more now that it is grey here. And I will go over this again with another layer once it's had a little bit of time to dry. So now I'm still back into playing and tweaking that sky as well, trying to get the connection where the sky meets the top of that mountain. So to try and get a softer effect, I'm dabbing my finger into the paint here and rubbing it into the paper around the moon to kind of help me to create that glow. Sometimes using your finger or dabbing with a rag like this can give you a much softer effect instead of a brush. So it's nice to experiment with these different kind of techniques, and I'm liking a little bit more how that's looking now. Tidying up the edges of that mountain. I'm now going back in already with the second layer of the grey, and you can see how it's getting darker. And nice sharp edges on that. So we're doing this kind of painting which is called a silhouette type painting. It's when everything is blackened out against a bright sky. That's what we call the silhouette. So with the round brush, the smaller brush now, I'm going back in again to tidy up some of those edges. I am trying to define again the edge of that moon to make it different to the part where I used my finger to smudge in. And so you can see just carefully. So I'm not painting in like a colouring in action of the entire moon because I don't want to lose the different kind of creamy colours that I added in earlier. So I'm going between the white and the cream. And it's important not to press down too hard with your brush when you're painting. It should only be the bristles of the brush that are touching the paper. The harder part of your brush shouldn't need to touch it. I'm feeling a bit happier with that now. Always important to keep cleaning your brushes as you go. So I'm going back in with a little bit more of the lighter blue. I think there was a big jump there from the moon colour to the next blue. So I'm just adding in a little bit more variety in the kind of blues I have here. So we want all different kinds of shades of blue. And now bringing some of that lighter blue colour out over the top of the darker blue that's there. And I'm doing this very loosely. You can see the action back and forth with my hand very loosely on top of the paint that's already there. That's a little bit dry now at this stage. So you're going with the light and you're going with the dark. You're trying to create layers so that you can see one colour through another. So like you can see with this, it took me, I think, a good hour, maybe a bit more to do this painting, not counting the drying times in between. I'm using the end of the brush here, not the bristle end, to scratch into the paint on the moon to kind of create a texture of the craters that we might see on the moon. And I'll come back to that later when the paint is dry, and I'll show you how we're going to work on top of that with pencil. Still not entirely happy with these edges. They feel like they're a bit too dark, so working on top of that again. More happy with the moon and how it looks in the center part of the painting now. And you'll see here that I'm not being super careful about coming down into the black of the mountain where I'm kind of putting that blue where they meet, because I'm really trying to make it look like it goes behind the mountain, not that one stops and the other starts. So you can see I'm actually messing up my edge a little bit, but I know I can fix that just like that quite easily again. So after the painting has dried, I'm using the image on my phone that I got used for inspiration, and I'm starting to draw with just a normal pencil onto the paint, the dry paint, and you can see the mountain part of it there isn't as fully dry, so I'm not going to lean on that with my hand, but I know that the moon part is dry enough for me to work on. So you can see the shine on the mountain still. So I'm working on this haunted house and a little bit of a graveyard that's going to appear around it, and there's also going to be a tree over to the right hand side. So I'm starting to put in some of that information now with just a normal pencil. I think I'm using a 2B pencil here. Next, the windows where the light is coming through, adding in with yellow paint. I'm not being super careful about this, and I know it is speeded up, but I can always go back and fix it later on if colour isn't exactly where I want it to be. Next, I'm using a watercolour black pencil to define the outlines and the parts of it that I'm going to find hard to do with a paintbrush because they're very tiny, especially the little crosses that are on the top of the building, and especially the end branches of that tree. So I'm using a brush to help me to define it so I can see it a lot more clearly, and then I'll introduce paint. And you can also do a little bit of kind of colouring in action with the brush, but it's giving me some good edges using the sharp pencil for this. So putting especially those little kind of railings and the detail that you'd see on the fence that's going down left and right of the house. So now I'm bringing in the paint. It's the same paint as I used on the mountain. You'll see the slight difference in it here now in that it is grey, so we are going to have to go over this again. So it is speeded up, so you can take your care with this. This was done a lot more slowly than you're seeing on the video. I'm trying to go around those little yellow windows that I added earlier, and adding in some of the detail, but not the very small detail that I did already with the pencil. So the bits that are suitable to the brush size that I'm using. So going back over the tree again, you can see it's starting to become blacker, and I'm doing some of the branches that are the thicker branches with the paintbrush. And now I'm already putting a second layer back over the house because it was quite a thin covering of paint that I put on it. And I did work, as I said to you, a good bit slower than you're seeing in this video, so it did have some time to dry. Touching up the yellow in case I went into where I shouldn't have gone with some of the black, trying to get the edges of those windows a little bit sharper and clearer. So I'm using the yellow paint on the brush here to do that. And now I have swapped over because I wanted a kind of much sharper point even than the pencil was giving me. And I'm using actually a drawing pen here. It's a very fine tipped nibbed drawing pen. You don't necessarily have to use this. You can stick to your pencil if you want. But I think it's going to work really nicely for me for the branches of the tree. And that's why I'm bringing it in now. So I'm just finishing off the fence on the right hand side. And like, it's not going to look too different to, you're not going to know where it was black pencil and where it was black pen. They're going to look very similar. Not going to look different. So the edges of the little points of the branch are working out really well for me with that. And as well, the inkiness of the pen sits a little bit better on top of the paint than the pencil might. So I'm trying to put in the detail now of the windows and the bars in the windows and stuff, but my paint is actually a tiny little bit too wet for it to work. So I'm swapping, as you can see, between the pen and the black pencil for this. And some of the paint that's put on a bit thicker on the windows is actually dragging out. So I'm having to do a little bit of tidying up as I make those little mistakes. And it's always okay, you know, embrace the mistakes. You don't need to do everything perfect all of the time. This is where I'm using a grey pencil and just a normal pencil to put some of that graphite dust that's on a pencil. Rubbed it into the moon there, and you can see it much more better in real life. And now I'm taking off the tape because I want to move this around for the video so that I can work into this little house again. I'm tidying up again the edges with my black paint and paintbrush, and while I'm doing this, I'm hoping that the yellow paint in the windows, it's going to have a little bit more time to dry so I can go back in and put my crisscross lines in the windows. And it looks really nice here with a nice white border around where you had the page taped down to your board. and this is your finished house. So I hope you enjoy having a go with this Halloween haunted house painting, and check back with me again for some more video tutorials. Thanks very much.